Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Dr. Wade. I am a clinical social worker. We welcome you to tonight's program broadcast that we're bringing to you and my brother's keepers with our host, Ms. Stephanie Seaton, for a show that is going to reach millions around the world, talking about men issues and concerns. We thank God for this allowing us to be today. We do have in the studio with us Mr. Hilton Young, aka GF Soldier. We thank him for being with us today. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, sir. How about yourself? Good to see you.
Doing, doing great, doing great. It's good to be here, good to be seen as well. Before we get started, we're going to open up with just a word of prayer as God to just continue to cover everything that we do and say in rooms that we enter into, the homes where we're invited. Father God, we thank you for your grace, mercy, and tender loving kindness. We ask you to be with us as we go forward to break words of encouragement and direction for men, Lord God, to build us up, Lord God, to strengthen us, to even tear down strongholds and walls. We thank you, Lord God, for inspiration and insight today. We ask you to allow us to be transparent today, Lord God, that we can continue to grow, change, and develop into the men you've called us to be. In Jesus' name, we thank you. Amen and amen.
Amen.
All right. Today's topic is a good one. I think we're talking about breaking generational cycles. I don't know about you, but I've had some history and living life and the generation of things that have attacked my family system throughout my lifespan have been vast, if you will. And I think uh, I would think some things are gone, then they seem like they will come back. And I found out that sometimes generational things that try to lag onto you, those cycles of insecurities, those cycles of depression, those cycles of dysfunctionality, they seem to kind of die out and come back if I don't pay attention to them being extinguished for a long period of time. So we thank God for this topic. And I want people that's listening in with us to begin to think about what needs to be broken in their lives in their life cycle that gives them ideas of what's keeping them stuck and keeping them hurting, keeping them in unhealthy relationships with themselves and other people. And what do you think there, Jeff? Do you think that the cycles of dysfunctionality takes us from thinking that we're okay to being back in that same place again? How do you see those generational cycles that we've been living in?
Well, I think one of the things that we're ignorant of, and not to say that in a degrading way, but I think we don't realize that the generational curses and generational cycles have biological influence on it. So that even if your environmental influence is not there, like for mother and father, if we say the father is not in the life, doesn't mean that you won't possess some type of quality in terms of behavior from an absentee father. Because, your environmental influence is the strongest, but we cannot forget the biological component as well, because a lot of the times when you look at the whole concept of nature versus nurture, uh, uh, sometimes we forget what we're naturally born with, because of the nurturing environment that we live in. We learn a lot as we grow. So a lot of the times when we become men, we possess certain type of behaviors, and we try to figure out, and we're confused of where that comes from. So I think it's important to examine our roots, examine our generational lineage, or our ancestral lineage, or our bloodlines, to see what is it about the people that came before us that makes me who I am and what I am today, and why I am the way I am today. So I
I
think
like
that's
that.
a huge influence.
Well, still,
So
I
I think
like
that's
that
a
mentality there. Yeah.
yes,
That's
yes,
why I think we had a tagline, right? Dealing with not only breaking a generational cycle, but redefining
mhm,
manhood and fatherhood.
yes,
And when you redefine something, that means you're replacing what we're currently doing with something new or more enriching to allow
mhm,
us to be a better man, person, human, colleague, co worker, friend than we have been in times past. Relearning some things or learning new things that give us a new sense of a purpose of being a healthy man.
yes,
I thought I was pretty healthy man for some seasons in my life, but I found out I was still doing the things I was taught, but that were survival mode techniques of living as a man versus genuineness that would break down um, different portals in my life that I didn't think were problematic, but they actually were, like trying to control relationships or trying to um, be a person didn't know how to connect emotionally with someone else. So very abstaining from emotional vulnerabilities. And all those things played a role in how I looked at manhood. We don't show emotions and feelings. I didn't have children until later on in life, so I didn't have the ability to raise a child when I was 19, 20, 21, 22, which at that time most men would abandon children, if you will, because of relationship with the woman that they're with. And redefine it even that. What does that commitment to children really look like? Or ideal facets of what we can talk about today. Because do you think that we were taught wrong in a lot of aspects? And what were some of those things you think we were taught wrong?
Yeah, I think we were taught wrong in many aspects. I think that we were taught wrong, as you mentioned, to hide our feelings, and the whole survivor mode thing. What it does, it causes us to ignore core issues that's going on inside of us because we were taught that big boys don't cry, big boys, have to suck it up, and a lot of the times it's not so much taught by the men in our life, is also taught by the women in our lives as well.
Yeah, most
And
definitely. Key.
yeah, so I think that we've been taught wrong in many perspectives, and and for the parental guidance that we have in our life, we love to give them credit for doing the best job that they could ever do raising us. But in doing that, I don't think we ever gave space for error. So we thought that, our moms, like my grandmother raised me after my mom passed away, I thought she did the perfect job. But there's some things even today that I learned in my environmental influence that I have to unlearn. Uh, that my grandmother not so much taught me verbally, but in her
Yeah.
actions and in her in the way she handled things from that perspective. So
Is that
um,
because you think she didn't have the tools to actually give us, although she gave us good information, but she didn't give us the right tools because she didn't have the tools.
No, and she was taught probably what her mom taught her to do too, and so she stayed in issues so long that the stress of the issue killed her before the cancer did. The cancer took her out, but the stress of holding on to things and having to be the strong person or having to quote unquote be the backbone, she allowed treatment to happen, abusive treatment to happen towards her, and it was considered noble to stay in stuff like that and to
Hmm.
suffer that type of trauma. And I have
Yeah.
to unlearn the fact that it's not really noble to stay in a situation where self neglect, self abandonment is taking place, and your overall mental health is being ignored because you're trying to be strong for
For
everybody else
everyone. Yeah.
and you're not being strong for yourself. So I'm having to unlearn that, not just from things I've learned from men in my life, but also the women in my life as well, because I was more connected to my grandmother than I was my grandfather. Neither of my fathers were there for me, and so there's some things I've learned from them that I wasn't trying to learn, but when you have that environmental influence where there is neglect and there is presence there, you learn from the presence and you learn from the neglect as well, even though there's no influence around you. But from a societal perspective, that also has a very impactful influence on you as well. So environmentally and socially, you're learning, and there's sometimes a pull and a war between the two
Hmm.
because you're trying to blend in and be both from an environmental perspective and a social perspective. So there's some things
Yeah.
you learn from either perspective that can sometimes conflict and be in contrast to each other, which can sometimes make it more confusing for a child. And then we grow up with that confusion as well, and then we have to sort everything out, and so that we can become more greater ambassadors of mental health and ambassadors of leadership for our children in order to move in
But,
other directions to break those cycles. Yeah.
but there's a cultural piece that comes into it as well.
Yes.
That there's a expectation
Mhm.
of people from different cultures, either
Mhm.
ethnic backgrounds, that define manhood or fatherhood, and the
Yes.
stigma is in the admin. It doesn't make it true. We live a truth that is really unprecedented, if you will, because of how it is labeled on certain people, and it becomes adaptable
Mhm.
to people without really you picking up the label for yourself. It's placed on you as society at large, and it's not necessarily totally true. It's like a person who may not be privy to have an opportunity to have wealth at an early age or know how to build financial growth. Some people say, well, I had to set my mind to it. These are mostly actors or song artists that tell a testimony how they made it out of certain poverty type situations. But those who did not have that ability to excel beyond through a talent, you won't find a lot of poverty stricken men who found that way out when they didn't have a tool to help them out. So their manhood and fatherhood was defined for them because their environment never changed.
Mhm.
So it became some habitually transcended to them over a period of time, and then they passed from generation to generation to
Yeah.
generation. Now I can understand the concept though. People having a talent, maybe having that financial grandparent or ability to get into arts or to ability of being able to gain access to a certain opportunity to gain riches and wealth.
Mhm.
Uh, but when it's not privy to all, we act that we act as if every man has a choice when sometimes that choice is hard to make when you are in a struggle mentality, trying to
Mhm.
understand what your current picture of manhood looks like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And then a lot of the times when we are presented with something different than what we've been accustomed to, it's hard to embrace that. And a lot of the times when it's hard to embrace that is because what we have learned over an extensive period of time of not having the tools, we our discernment in terms of what is right and what is wrong will differ a lot from a person who has had the tools and who has had access to a better environment or influence, if you will, and that discernment of right and wrong can differ from culture to culture.
Yeah, that's true.
It can differ from family to family in terms of your morals, ethics, standards, and values. And so even when you're presented with it, there's still a major conflict there in terms of what's right and what's wrong. And a lot of the times we end up suffering the consequences of the wrong we done because at some point we thought it was okay to do and we thought it was the right thing to do because that because what we've been taught and what we've learned has been, so emotionally attached to who we are and it in terms of our genetic makeup and our upbringing is that we do it. Sometimes we do it with a bit of regularity and in a bit of normality that it's like second nature to us. For
Yeah,
people who don't have the tools. And so, go ahead. I'm sorry.
and I think that's the reason why that topics like this is important because I understand starting over, re-identifying what um, stability looks like
Hmm.
within a man is important,
Yes.
and we sometimes don't grasp it until we get older.
Hmm.
When in essence we think that some younger men are taught it, but they're not. They're
Right.
given. I grew up in Dallas, in the Oak Cliff area, and I was given tools by men in my community that were not effective tools
Right.
to be successful with.
Mhm.
So I took those two and I applied them because that's what was given to me.
Right.
So I didn't know what to replace them with, but most people think since you're older, you should know better, and you only know what you know.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're 30, you could be 30 and 40, and you could be married, and you can have a couple of kids, you can have a job for 10 years, but if nothing new has entered into your portal
Mhm.
of understanding, your ability to be vulnerable is still zero.
Yes.
Transparent is zero.
Right.
To be committed to that wife that you are living with is zero because we still have the same tools.
Mhm.
It has to be reshaped. Because I mean, here I am, I'm 50 years plus, and I am still learning how to surrender.
Yep.
It wasn't a one
Yep.
time thing for me.
Yep.
I'm still learning how to surrender to not only God as my my covering, my head, my life, but to relationships so that I can be healthy for the person I'm involved with, like my children,
Mm.
so they won't get a unhealthy me.
Yeah. Well, surrenderance is an ongoing process. It's a perpetual process. I don't think you ever stop learning how to surrender.
Mm.
I mean, I think that's a hard thing for humans, let alone men to do, especially strong men. I think the concept of vulnerability, and this is the issue with men that has been raised in urban inner city societal influences like where we come from, and we call it the hood. Some people call it the hood, some people call it
Hmm.
the ghetto, some people call it the streets, whatever you want to call it. The concept of vulnerability, the way it was taught to us when we were growing up, is that it's weakness. And
Yeah,
it's not weakness. Vulnerability is actually courage, and it's the courage
yeah,
to tell your whole story with your whole heart, and that's what it is. So it's getting people to reframe and restructure and reinterpret what's been taught to us in the wrong way. And so I think it's important for us for vulnerability to happen because the lack thereof causes a whole lot of stress,
yeah,
particularly among us as black men, because we think it's weakness. We hold a lot of stuff in, and we fear to let it out. And I think fear at the core of us is the biggest emotion that that is instilled in us. It's just that we use anger to mask it. And, anger is a secondary emotion, but beneath that anger, at the core of it, it's fear. So when somebody makes us mad and ticks us off, it's normally because what the person did hurt their feelings, and we, until this day, even I'll speak, just from a transparent perspective, just to be more transparent. It's even uncomfortable for me to tell me that my brother hurt my feelings. I would rather
mm,
say, you know, my brother pissed me off. So anger appears to be, and we have embraced anger as men, as the number one emotion to express ourselves, because
yeah,
anger appears to not emasculate us. And I think that's why we use anger, because we don't want to be emasculated. And
yeah,
and we think that fear and vulnerability is what's going to emasculate us. And so,
yeah,
I think it's important that we turn that around and understand that when I know you're angry at me, I know I did something to hurt your feelings. And we can be so
mm.
sensitive as men, if it, and especially in the hood, if you look at me wrong, I I think you're ready to fight.
Yeah. I can
But
still be a strong man with emotions.
right.
I can still be a leader with emotions.
Mhm.
I can still be my kid's superhero with emotions.
Mhm.
And I think that's that vulnerability piece, knowing who you can be without trying to pretend to be um, invincible. That's a good word to use for people when I know I'm not, for even myself.
Mhm.
That person I see in the mirror, I see more than a reflection. I see a man who is trying to keep it together for the sake of others when I really need to be asking other people for help to pull me through what I'm stuck in. That's redefining manhood.
Yeah.
Why or what is the reason I find it so difficult to ask another man for help to improve myself? However, it's easy or it's simpler to ask someone for help to go destroy something.
Right.
So I'm gonna ask you to go, hey, let's go jump on this person. Hey, let's go tear down this store in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, hey, I need help healing. I need help restoring. I
Mm-hmm.
need help training. I need help building. But people don't run to build, they run to destroy
Mm-hmm.
when they see that you are hurting. When you're hurting, when I'm hurt, I need you to come help me to restore versus running to help me to continue to destroy.
Right.
That's that manhood. I want to teach my kids that problem solving mentality of looking for opportunities to not stay stuck,
Right.
you know. And I
Yeah.
think that's going to help us overcome a lot of the traditional ideas that we have been implanted with to keep us on the defense with most things that we face throughout our careers, you know.
Yeah.
I get mad someone terminate me from a job, so I want to go postal on the job versus thinking of an idea. Maybe I'm not meant to work for people, so maybe I need to start my own business. And how do I do that? And I don't want to ask for help. That's that manhood thing again, because if I ask for help, you know I'm in trouble, or you know I need something, or I'm wanting something from you.
Mm-hmm.
But soon as I bring you my complaint, you hop on board with the negative versus, okay, how can I get started like you got started? Turn me on to that pipeline there so that I can get that same small business loan that you got and start my business over here. Yeah, we're gonna be in competition, but you selling one product, I got a product. Or we got
Mm-hmm.
the same product. They got a Walgreens and a um what's that other store? CVS right across the street from each other. I heard they were
Yeah.
owned by the same. I mean, they selling the same product right across the street from each other, but
Right.
we can't have two car washes next to each other because it's too much capitalism. Not
Mm-hmm.
enough people to go around. Why is it not enough people to go around? It's
Mm-hmm.
100 people in this radius. You mean that we both can't share 50? You want all 100?
Mm-hmm.
My manhood allows me to allow people to come into the growth that I'm becoming, not just the hurt that I've experienced.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's where that change comes. What do you think?
Yeah. What I'm hearing is when you say that, that I hear you redefining manhood when you say that, in in putting manhood in its proper context. And I think what we have done growing up is that we've taken so many things out of context and made it mean what we wanted to mean to make it look a certain way. So you mentioned the word pretend, right? So we
Yes.
do a lot of pretending.
Mm-hmm.
That there's a quote that comes to mind when we talk about pretending, and it says, "When we spend a lifetime trying to distance ourselves from the parts of our lives that does not fit in with who we think we're supposed to be, we step or stand outside of our own stories and we hustle for worthiness by constantly proving, performing, perfecting, pleasing, and pretending to be something or someone that we're not."
Yeah.
So
That's
a
that
lot of
imposter syndrome.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So we spend most of our lives in performance mode
Yeah.
trying to prove that we're something that we're really not, that we never were meant to be, but we felt like we had to be in order to fit in or to be accepted, because mainly because self-acceptance wasn't there. Who I really am does not appear to be good enough to meet the standard of what society is telling me that I need to be. So let me neglect myself and abandon who I am and just be who I feel like my societal surrounding and environmental influence think that I should be instead of who
Yeah.
I am. And so I hear you redefining what manhood should be at this point and what manhood is not at this point. And it is in, it's the responsibility of the individual to be able to come to that conclusion in order for change to be able to take
They
place.
have to recognize it themselves.
Yes,
We have to recognize ourselves,
yes,
most definitely. And I put we in it because I'm still working on me. I haven't come to a point that I have obtained because I'm still living.
hmm
I still have a lot of growth to experience in order for me to still become the person I am being developed into becoming. We're ever evolving into being a healthier us, hopefully, and that
hmm
I will never get satisfied with the model that God has brought me to. But there's a higher calling He's calling us all to. The goal is to be teachable
yes,
so that we can apply new things on a daily basis.
yes,
One of the problems I think that's happened over our lifespan is this: if we've ever been exposed to trauma, you mentioned that grandparents raised you a good portion of your life. My family was a single parent household with a community of alcohol and drug addicts, mostly around me in my community, and drug dealers and things like that. So I learned some concepts, and I felt my mom gave me some good tools, but my community still shaped me.
yeah, absolutely.
You know, and I didn't realize it until I got older that I was traumatized by the things that I experienced
hmm
within my community.
Yes,
And they were part of my core belief system
yes,
that I had to dismantle.
yep,
Even at past 40 years of age, I wasn't in this childhood mentality, but I was still doing mentalities of not willing to be committed to a relationship.
hmm
That's that negative mentality right there, that trauma
yeah,
that I ain't getting hurt again.
right,
You ain't leaving me first, I'm leaving you first mentality.
gotcha.
So I kept that wall up as a defense mechanism to
hmm
keep me hypothetically safe. But here I am imposing my inability to be loyal to a person
hmm
with superficial emotions.
right,
I didn't know how to feel.
yeah,
You know,
I hear that, I hear that. And so as it relates to trauma, and I think sometimes we get this misconstrued as well. Trauma, it's not so much the occurrence or the event that's impactful. It is the perception of the event that makes it impactful. And so when sometimes people look at trauma, they think this big to do has to happen. Like you have to go to war in Iraq to experience trauma. Or
you don't. No, you
or,
don't.
or like for me, I was, I'm from New Orleans, so I came here from Dallas because of Katrina, and that was traumatic. But sometimes what people deem as small situations, or people try to bring out their measuring stick and measure which trauma is greater than the other. Well, you can't measure how trauma is greater than the other based on the event itself. Because one person could go through a thunderstorm and some person can go through a full-fledged hurricane, and both of those things can have the same effect, or the storm that is not as great as the hurricane can have an even greater effect on the person based on how it's perceived. And
Yeah,
so
most definitely.
so nothing, nothing is, trauma does not discriminate on the basis of the event itself. When trauma hits the brain, it's going to affect the brain regardless of how big the event is perceived. So even with the trauma of dealing with issues from that societal standpoint, and it shaped who you are, that still has an effect on you, and the healing process is an ongoing process because healing don't have a timeline. You can't put limits on that healing process because that healing process is ongoing. So as long as a person is healing, then that then you can give them credit for the forward progress. But
Right.
when people go through trauma, a lot of people are never fully healed from it, but are experiencing forward progression in the healing process, the ongoing healing process. There's some things that I'm still healing from, that I am not yet healed from, that happened 25, 35, 40 years ago when I was a kid,
Right.
and I'm still healing from it today. And the event seemingly wasn't that big, but the way it affected me for a long time because
That's the key. How did it really affect me?
how it really affected you.
Yeah.
So
If
when,
I
so
can
when,
talk about it, I can create change
yes,
for it.
yes, indeed,
And again, it does take time. You make that good point. It takes time if you're working on it.
yeah,
eh, And then the time decreases, if you will, on how you heal. But if I'm
hmm
not working on it, but I'm just allowing it to exist because I know about it, I'm aware of it, but I'm not working on getting it out of my cycle of living so that I can talk about it without being impaired by it,
hmm
right?
yeah,
That helps me to be healthy as well as a man because I can talk to my children now about. I was talking to my daughter, she's 9, about we saw this guy on the street. So, oh, he looks homeless, this, that, and other. I said, yeah, that's a tough position to be in. I was talking about this. They said, well, have you ever been homeless? I said, yeah, I have been,
hmm
and I told her briefly about that concept of it, and how long it was I was in that state. And the idea behind it is that it's tough getting out of conditions, if you will. And then when you get out of them, the goal is to build, to continue from not going back to that mentality.
right,
But guess what? No one is exempt from going back if you don't keep doing the work.
hmm
Not to go back to that mentality, that state of living, and it's just tremendous in how we look at part of our roles is to continue to maturate, if you'll mature in who we are as a person. And if we do have setbacks,
hmm
we reapply the tools that helped us even the last time to get out of that mentality or the
yeah,
lifestyle or behavior. We have to
hmm
know that the tools, if they work then, they work now.
yes,
They,
indeed,
they, they mentioned in the Bible that God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. So we utilize God's presence, His spiritual principles, the
hmm
same way.
hmm
We just need to do them every day,
hmm
not just when the crisis comes, but even before the crisis. I'm applying tools so that we see Him what continually doing the same intervention approach in our lives.
hmm
So we don't get stagnant in our walk.
yes,
You know, that helps with the healing piece too.
hmm
You
absolutely,
know, knowing that no person will help me heal. I have
hmm
to heal with my higher power and the tools that other people may give me, but I have to heal so that when I am talking to my kids, I can teach them how to heal.
absolutely,
I usually give people this thought process as well.
hmm
We normally can't give away something that we don't possess.
that's some good stuff.
I'm not even positive toward myself. I'm gonna be positive toward you.
hmm
It's very difficult, you know.
That's
And I
good.
felt I've been in a good place for a pretty good while, but I felt still unhappy in relationships. But I would
hmm
talk to people about relationships and I would get this reflection. But here I am in a relationship with someone at this time, it was a year and a half ago, and it really wasn't what I wanted, but it was sustaining. But it wasn't what I wanted,
hmm
meaning it didn't take me to the place I needed to be
right,
or
right,
wanted to be.
hmm
I was just sustained in it. So it
hmm
gave me the inappropriate tools to be the man I need to be in relationship and to be the father to my children who saw me in a relationship that was going nowhere.
hmm
Right? Then it ends and all they have is questions. Where this person at? What happened? And I don't know how to explain it. It was
hmm
my fault or their fault or we just grew apart. I don't know what. And fathers try their best to understand how to conceive this information so we can give it to others versus I can't talk about this journey. Well, I gotta talk about it so I don't repeat it.
hmm
I gotta talk about it so I don't embed it into them when they get old enough to begin a day that they repeat the cycle that I'm trying to break, but I won't teach them how I'm breaking it.
right,
Hence, we have the generational thing happening.
hmm
So, our goal is to give some tools away I know
Right.
trauma is hard, but when we
Yep.
talk through it and talk about it, we get to our next level of change. And that's key for us doing something different. You know, 2024 is different than when I was born in 67. So here I am uh, growing as a man all these years. In 2024, we look at manhood, fatherhood differently
Mhm.
than it was when I was younger. You
Mhm.
know, um, the aspect of how people think about commitment levels,
Mhm.
is very hot on topics. They're going to be talking about it next week during this election process, right? Men, fatherhood, being able to um, be not only breadwinners, but the financial supporters in the relationship that give guidance and direction for the family as a whole. You know, the
Mhm.
question is, are we going to be within a family system to make that family system grow? Or
Mhm.
do we continue to, I guess, abandon these relationships based on our needs that never are met?
Right.
Our needs are never are met. What do you think? What do you think different in the men that you grew up with versus the men you see being adults now, the younger generation?
Well, I think that the core principles are still there. I think the difference is in terms of those core principles, in terms of being man, in terms of being manhood, in terms of fatherhood. I think that the way it is applied today in 2024 is a lot different than in the way it was applied in 1984. So I think the difference is how it's applied. I think we have access to information that is so fast. I think we've changed the way we've learned, even in the school system. Like, I teach a class every Wednesday to middle schoolers. They don't have things to write with anymore. They all have Chromebooks, and so
Well, that's true.
all of their assignments is on Chromebooks. My son, he's in college now. Most of his assignments is online. He goes into a classroom, but he does most of his work on a computer. So I don't see notebooks anymore. I don't see, you know, I don't see pencils and pens anymore. I see Chromebooks. I see laptops. I see so just because society has changed, we've had to adjust to that, and we've had to take our core principles and apply it in different ways. But I think fathers of today are not that much different from yesterday in terms of core principles. I think that it's applied in a much different manner today than it was back in the day. Like I had to understand in raising my son, he's a Gen Z guy, and one of the things I had to understand, I know that back in the day, to handle conflict, you're gonna get some hands put on you. Uh, Mama gonna go get that belt, um, or whatever she can get in her hand type stuff. So I know I had to make that adjustment uh, in terms of how I raised my son, and I had to do a little bit more talking. I had to understand him better because a lot of the times the children I had to adjust to the style of my grandmother. I had to get to know my grandmother well in order to adjust to the style of my grandmother. Today, in raising my children, I want to get to know them a little better and let them know that their thought process matters a lot more. And it ain't just because I said so. Now I'm more of a teaching person more than I'm a disciplinarian, like the house I came up in. I mean, you was gonna get tagged when you was a kid. Even when I was in school, we got whipped by the teacher. We got paddled by the teacher in the school, and them paddles hurt.
Right.
You know, yeah, I didn't know if you were talking or not. I'm
Most
sorry.
definitely. I
Yeah,
agree with that. Most definitely. Do it now.
yeah. So, I think today is much different now. I think in terms of how we discipline kids is a lot different now. And you have to do a different approach because the kids in my class, in the school that I go to, uh, these are kids that are considered to have behavioral issues. It's not so much that they have behavioral issues. It's just that their learning style is a lot different than most people. So you have to adjust to their learning style and realize that no, it's not a behavioral issue. It's just that they have a different learning style, and you have to be able to adjust to that to be able to teach them and grab their attention. Because if not, you're going to lose them. And if you lose them, then it's going to look like they have behavioral issues because they're not paying attention. So I think it's different from a perspective that
Right.
we have to learn each other better. We have to understand each other better and get a chance to know each other better, and not be so quick to want to jump to the discipline aspect of it and say, do what I tell you to do or else type stuff like we came up. So it's
Right.
different in many ways. It's that you have to apply that parental guidance in a different way. We have to be more authoritative and less authoritarian like it was for us back in the day. It was more authoritarian back in the day. I think we need to just be more authoritative, be more empathetic, be more objective in terms of how we approach today in terms of fatherhood, parenthood, and things of that magnitude.
Got you covered on that for sure. I noticed a lot of challenges when I was younger than now. I don't use corporate punishment with my kids. I use a lot more the electronic discipline with my kids as well. So
Hmm.
that's different than this parenting that I face. Um, I've learned how to temperament my temper
Hmm.
to not be emotionally aggressive
Right.
toward them, to get them to have a sense of fear, but a sense of respect toward me.
Hmm.
As a parent today, I think that my mom not intentionally created a sense of fear with a corporal punishment behavior toward us.
Hmm.
And I think what it caused me to become is more closed to opening up about things versus opened and trusting the parent with things that I really need to talk about,
Hmm.
right? That's a big difference today when I'm older parenting versus younger parenting, because younger parents their kids some of their friends in a way, and
Hmm.
that creates more of another problem in reference to having them have more um, leeway to do things, and
Hmm.
allow them also maybe more problematic aspect of getting into early substance use and maybe even promiscuous behavior mentality. We're looking at raising children.
Hmm.
Fathers have to be present to give guidance.
Hmm.
My dad was not there to give me guidance. I am here more prevalent in my children, like giving them guidance. And I know some men that are my age are not in contact with their children. When I go to my church, a lot of these men are trying to be in contact with their children. They're trying to be attached and connected with their children, be a part of their activities and education and things like that, which causes kids to be more streamlined into talking through things with a parent versus ignoring the parent and asking a friend who has no information. No information. They got 14, 15-year-old information. They don't
Hmm.
have the adult information that gives them the greater outcome if this actually is carried out by you, right?
Hmm.
And that's where that differentiation happens at. Do
Hmm.
they look at me as a lead in their lives, or
Hmm.
this compatible friend that I never can really become for them because that's not my role.
Hmm.
That is not my role. When I was younger, children were seen and not heard. Now I want to hear them. Tell me
Hmm.
what's going on. You know, and my son had a doctor's appointment today, and I let him do a lot of the talking. I'm sitting
Hmm.
there just listening. I'm like, he's on point with everything. Then he deferred to me. Hey, you answer this. And, I'm like, okay. He trusts the atmosphere we in
Hmm.
versus it's hard for him to talk in the atmosphere we both are in.
Hmm.
That's been a difference maker in how we are bringing fatherhood to a different level. How often do I really sit and talk to them about what's interesting to them
Hmm.
versus what's interesting to me? Because they'll tell me in a minute, didn't you ask me my opinion? I'm like, yeah, I did. My bad. I apologize. I did that. Because
Right.
if their voice is not heard by me, they're only going to
Hmm.
speak to their friends. That's what I talked to when I was a kid. I talked to my
Hmm.
friend. My mom did not know my journey.
Right.
Right. And I think that is the key thing to growth and development in how we're becoming better fathers. When we're
Absolutely,
looking at male friends, you have male mentors in your life?
I do.
Yeah. When did you think that you identified that you needed them?
I think it's been about 20 years now when I first
Okay.
got saved. My pastor became more of a mentor to me. He was not only my spiritual father, my spiritual leader. He was also a mentor to me. He taught me what manhood really was from a godly perspective, and I clung, I cleaved to it more than it's almost like I married it, and I adopted it, and it became my style in which I walk in humility. The brothers that I met in the church at that time. I call my big brother. He's about 65 years old, and and he taught me a lesson on humility that I carried till this day. So I was clinging on to people because I had that thirst for knowledge, and so I acquired a lot of wisdom from these men, and I used it in my walk. And forever in their debt because they taught me things that they didn't know they were teaching me just by their example more than their verbal expression. And so I think mentorship is a very crucial thing in the African American community, particularly as it relates to black men. And you know, um, I don't think I would be where I'm at without it.
Most definitely. I picked up on them throughout my maybe a middle adulthood, childhood. I mean, middle adulthood to adulthood, maybe early 20s. It was a pastor as well. But
Hmm.
I think what caused me not to glean from him was I began to backslide again, go back into that mentality of the substance use and
Hmm.
not trusting people. Because when I started drinking again, it began to defer me from not going to church. And now I have my default people who I was introduced to as a kid still doing the same thing. So that's why I went right back into that group of people. Then I got
Hmm.
older as I went through my recovery period and got on my feet and went back to school and everything. I found I needed other mentors. And what happened is that I began to wane off of them because I felt okay. And I found out recently I need mentors the rest of my life.
Hmm.
I need men I can be vulnerable with.
Yes, indeed.
I need
Yes.
men I can be accountable to.
Hmm.
Because if I can get called on my stuff, I'm less apt to get into mentalities and behaviors to get me caught up again to getting in trouble with law enforcement or get in trouble with relationships failing, being negative or rude to my children, not being respectful to the community that I live and serve in. All these
Hmm.
things are important factors about me finding someone I can be accountable with.
Hmm.
That's that role of a friend, right? And I have two mentors, but I do have several friends that I can talk to as well. And I
Hmm.
text someone every day. Every day. I had to get out of that mindset. Well, maybe I'm getting on the nerve. Well, I'm gonna let them tell me that.
Hmm.
People told me, call me anytime. So at 3 in the morning, if I can't sleep and some on my mind, I don't know what's this. I texting someone. I might not hit send to 5 o'clock, but I'm texting it to them.
Hmm.
Because my mind, my brain is racing, right? I need men to help me to calm down things that I'm not understanding in my
Absolutely.
head,
Yes.
right? That's where that support comes from. We're looking at how do these uh, men, when they come out, how do they help me break these patterns of insecurities, whatever I might be dealing with, because
Hmm.
they listen and they give me feedback because they maybe had an experience what I'm going through, or they may be going through it at that time themselves.
Hmm.
But most mentors I have, they have mentors too. I'm guessing the pastors you gleaned from, they had pastors that they were talking to and things
Hmm.
like that.
Yes.
You know, that's when we began to mess up. I may have a pastor friend or a mentor. What if I'm not transparent with them?
Hmm.
Why I got them if I'm not going to utilize them? That's my point.
Right.
I mean, I'm just wasting theirs and mine because I could have been honest with them, and here I am hiding from them.
Hmm. Yes, but a good mentor who's been connected to you for a while can sometimes recognize patterns in you that are different than what you've been showing from the giddy up, and they can call you on that too. Like, I'm noticing a pattern. Like, one of my mentors said, I'm noticing a pattern from you, and this pattern that I'm noticing from you is going down the wrong road. So let's talk
Right.
about this pattern. You keeping something from me, you're hiding something from me because your pattern is different now. Tell me about that pattern. And so, and even when I mentor people that I mentor today, I say the same thing. I'm noticing something from you. I'm picking up something from you. Tell me what I'm picking up. What are you trying to hide? Is it embarrassing you? Is it bringing about shame, guilt, and
Hmm.
embarrassment? If so, let's talk about it, because that shame, guilt, and embarrassment is going to kill you, and that shame, guilt, and embarrassment uh, is blocking you from true accountability. Don't allow shame to do that, because uh, shame will make you run from responsibility and accountability. And so I
Yeah,
want to make sure, as not just your mentor, but as your brother, that I hold you accountable even for the things that you're not telling me. I
and
hear what
most
you're saying.
definitely.
I hear what you're saying, but your patterns are telling me something different, and I want to know what your pattern is telling me, so that accountability can always be there. I don't have to beat you up with accountability. I don't have to rebuke you in the name of Jesus. I don't have to tell you that you're going to hell. I want to tell you that I love you and I see you. Tell me what that is so that we can talk about it. Because accountability don't have to be harsh. Accountability, it comes from love as well. So let me love on you with this accountability, and not beat the heck out of you or beat the crap out of you with it and condemn you to the pits of hell and make you feel worse than what you are. Let me love on it a little bit, so that so that accountability can help you grow, and accountability can help you build. And that's what
Yes.
constructive criticism is. Construct is to build. Negative criticism is there to tear you down. I'm not trying to tear you down. I'm trying to build you up. So let's talk about this accountability thing, and let me soften your heart a little bit and say, you know what? I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. I'm just going to love you in the process of doing that. So let's talk about that. You know?
Okay. Most
Yeah.
definitely. And I appreciate that as well because that's one thing that my mentors do for me.
Mhm.
They they know that I have something to talk about all the time. And I feel that I grow every day. One of
Mhm.
my triggers is like my ex-wife. She may have a conversation with me about the kids or something, and it's how she says certain things that really like, why did that come out like that? And
Mhm.
I had to learn not to let that affect my response.
Mhm.
So I talk to him about it all the time, and I still talk about it if it begins to come up. But since I've noticed it as being a trigger, I'm
Mhm.
less likely to act out another way
Mhm.
because now I'm able to talk about what is bothering me versus embedding it in here as if no one understands because all these guys are married. They don't understand what I'm dealing with, but actually they do.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely.
They just happen to stay married with this same type of
Mhm.
possible response that they're experiencing with their wives. And the
Mhm.
goal is finding ways to talk through the frustration of it
Mhm.
without becoming frustrated yourself.
Right.
Because when I become frustrated, now the tools that I have, I'm not going to apply them because now I'm in my feelings.
Mhm.
When I get my feeling, my thoughts get involved, and if I think a certain way, I become a certain way, and I
Right.
act a certain way, and now I'm back. Now maybe at square one, but I'm back at this negative core belief of things versus a positive core belief of things that
Mhm.
shifts my energy level
Mhm.
to being the person I need to be versus the person I'm becoming.
Right.
Right. And for me, that's a daily thing because I never know what thing could be the next thing to
Mhm.
trigger me if
Right.
I don't stay self aware.
Mhm. That's
We're
good.
talking about us becoming more responsible men, for ourselves as was for us, our children as well, becoming more responsible who we are and how that really impacts us as we grow older and become healthier as men. You
That's good.
know, this show that we do every fourth Sunday from 7 to about maybe 8:30 or so
Mhm.
is impactful for men to talk
Mhm.
through and about things when they have no other platform they may can connect with. Now, there are many social media outlets that men can get attached to. The
Mhm.
goal is for people to call in and utilize their voice to talk about things that have been hindrances in their
Mhm.
everyday growth process toward change. Because that's
Mhm.
all we want to do, making sure that we are in a different place than we were even yesterday. Not even looking at 12 months ago, but
Right.
yesterday I'm in a better place than I was only because I applied a different tool today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think to be able to have that safe space, because sometimes you have to have the tough conversation, even if shame, guilt, and embarrassment have its way. We have to be strong enough to overcome the shame, guilt, and embarrassment and have the tough conversation, whether it be
Mhm.
about things like infidelity. That's a sensitive topic to talk about, but it needs to be talked about.
Yes.
Whether you are the offender or whether you are a victim. You know what I'm saying? And then in those cases, I've been the offender, and I've had to come clean and talk about those things and hold myself accountable for that too. And one of the things I had to learn about coming clean with the tough talk is to be willing to unconditionally apologize for the things I've done, and then unconditionally continue to do repeated acts of contrition, right?
Yeah.
And then after that, be willing to repair the damages that you caused in order for the healing process to begin. And which is a tough thing to do. It's painful to confess. It's painful to be contrite, and it's painful to apologize unconditionally with no ands, ifs, or buts about it. So even it has to be a safe space to be able to talk about the tough things as well without beating people over the head. But first, that starts with, like you said, self awareness and an act of contrition and an unconditional apologize with the mentality of helping to repair the damages that you caused. Like that's a big thing to do. And giving the victim the safe space to be able to say ouch in whichever way they want to say ouch. So,
Yeah.
if they get mad and they get upset and all other stuff, allow that space for that because they're only saying ouch. And remember that I am here to help repair the damages. So I have to give that safe space for you to say ouch in whichever way you need to say ouch.
I
Hard thing,
agree with that.
hard thing to do, but the safe space has to be there. And if the safe space is not there, there can't be no healing on either side of the equation. On either side of the spectrum, there can't be no healing there. So even with the tough talk, we as men have to be willing to have the tough talk, leave space for the tough talk, and not avoid and run from it. That's the only way healing is going to take place. Healing is painful, and you have to be willing to deal with the pain. Healing is the relief of healing is way on the other side of that thing. In the beginning stages of healing, it's gonna hurt like a son of a gun. So let's deal with the pain, and let's deal with the pain that we've caused and the damage that we caused, and let's be willing to help repair those damages. And that's gonna take a while because you can't put a time limit, you can't put a time frame on healing. That's an ongoing process. So I think, from that
I have to
perspective,
learn.
having that tough. Go ahead.
I have to learn something about that healing piece, that trust and things like that.
Hmm.
When I apologized to my ex-wife and other people I've dated about not being faithful,
Hmm.
and I had to heal and forgive myself as well. I had to learn not to be responsible for her healing.
Hmm.
I could only respond for my amends, right? And once I made the amends, I worked on me, and they had to work on them.
Hmm.
One thing I thought about my ex-wife being a trigger sometime with me is that she has not really let go of the hurt that I initiated through not being faithful in our relationship. We probably should have not got married, but we did.
Hmm.
However, um, I feel and believe and know that I wasn't in love with her to a point that I probably would could have been faithful as I wanted to. And
Mhm.
I believe that was probably maybe the core thing. And I recommend that men who are seeking matrimony or in they're married right now, you have to find a way to really connect with the woman you're with. Because if
Mhm.
you're not connecting, you're gonna live disconnected.
Indeed.
Period. You have to find a way to know that this is a relationship that you want to build, grow, and develop into a healthy relationship. you
Mhm.
know. And I'll tell you, when I got divorced, I began to date other women, and it began to be that um, we had open relationship. We didn't care. So I had the mentality. Now I'm going back to my early 20 days and my thinking. It's okay not to be committed because they didn't want to be committed either.
Mhm.
They wanted to date other people, and they were okay with me. And it became so much of an epidemic within me that I found it even hard when I met someone I may want to spend time with. I couldn't be committed to them because it was something stirring my spirit. Right, I
Mhm.
had to break the yokes of that, um, what they call this soul tie, if you will, with all these other people I've been connected with, and I couldn't break it because I kept going back to these other people that were attaching me unhealthily to unhealthy relationships. And they weren't violent; they were just non-committed.
Mhm.
And that non-committed caused me not to seek that one, but seek several,
Mhm.
and it created this emotional void within me,
Mhm.
right? And I don't know. I mean, there was someone put a question in the chat. He said, "Do men cheat due to lack of love?" I don't know if it was lack of love because there was a sense of affection there in the relationship. However, it was my inability to commit to one person. And I think this, I guess this is what I thought anyway. I could love more than one person or be in love with more than one person. And that may be true
Mhm.
across the board, but my heart is probably only going to truly love one
Mhm.
at a time. Truly. It's hard for my heart to be in two places giving love to two people because it's going to be torn. And when something is torn,
Yes.
is you can't give something whole because you're torn
Right.
or broken
Right.
or not together. You're in two different places because you're
Mhm.
torn. So how can I give you all of me if half of me is here, half of me is here?
Right. Right.
So I give you pieces of me, which again destroys the relationship, destroys the opportunity to grow, stuff like that. You
Mhm.
know,
Right. Right. So if there is a lack of love there, it's a lack of love for self that makes us
I can go with that.
want to go
Okay.
and cheat. If there's a lack of love there, not so, and a lot of the times when there's a lack of love of self, and not speaking for you, but just speaking for myself, when you have a lack of love of self, it becomes more difficult to love the person that you're with because you're still trying to figure out how to love self. And a lot of the times we misconstrue loving self by going finding other people to love us because of the lack of love we have for ourselves. So there's a void. I think that cheating comes from a void that we're trying to fill, other than the fact that it's a choice, other than the fact that it can also come from greed. Speaking for myself, I have a book called Trifling to Transform. And so in my redemptive road, I was trifling. I was low down. I was irresponsible, and so and that trifleness can still exist in you if you don't manage it well. You
You better
understand what I'm
get
saying?
work on
So
it every
so
day.
so so I don't, so I'm not just gonna say I was trifling. I still have that trifling behavior in me. I just know how to manage it better. And when tri them trifling thoughts come in, I I deal with it. I manage it. I know right from wrong, and I'm going to make the choice to exhibit self control and not go down that road again, and make sure that I'm accountable to self first, and make sure I love myself enough not to just go down this road of promiscuity again, because I'm trying to fill the desires of the flesh, right? And so Am I trifling? Yeah, Paul said, I am carnal. Paul said,
Yeah,
"Oh wretched man that I am." He didn't say, "Oh wretched man that I was." He didn't say I
yeah.
was carnal. He spoke present tense. He said, "Oh wretched man that I am." So I will say, "Oh trifling man that I am." But
Mhm.
I'm constantly at war. But now that spirit of self control has to come in because that's a fruit of the spirit. Yes,
Right, right.
yeah, just like when Stephanie said the crazy lady or the crazy girl in my head, I have a crazy man in my head, and
I have
and
a
he
crazy man in my head.
and he trifling, he nasty, he like women, he like women and how they curve and all that other stuff. So I have to be able to acknowledge that this side of me exists as well, not just the man of God, not just the
Yeah,
man who ministers to people and spit poetry, who does counseling and pour into people. No, I still have that side of me as well, and you have to be able to acknowledge that part of yourself, just like Paul acknowledged. Paul said, I am the chief of sinners. So Paul used present tense. He didn't use past tense. He said, I'm still like this, but
mm-hmm.
I
Work
have
on
this
me.
spiritual maturity. I'm now going to be transformed by the renewing of my mind, and
Right.
I'm going to walk and do better. Some people say if you know better, you do better. Well, that's not always the case. You know better and you should do better, but a lot of people that know
Mhm.
better don't always do better. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? And
that's why
so,
those mentors are important to talk
exactly,
to and talk through and connect and
exactly.
listen and take their feedback and stay teachable and confess that thing out and do something different.
Yes.
You know, people change.
Oh, they
That's the
do.
key. People do change. Men and
Yes.
women change. The
Yes.
question of thing we toss around our head: can I change every day? Yes.
Yeah.
Even if I mess up right now, I can change tomorrow.
Yeah. It's continual.
People will hold you down, but you
Mhm.
can never hold yourself down.
Yeah.
You
And
know.
that self awareness and that self accountability is so key because if you can't hold self accountable, your mentors are gonna do no good to have in your
Mhm.
life because if you can't be convicted by yourself, you know, uh, you know, the your mentors will be just talking to a brick wall, pretty
Yeah.
much. And so that daily confession, that daily death, that dying daily to flesh is a big thing that you have to do. It's a consistent, ongoing thing that has to be done
Mhm.
every day in your life. Paul said, "I die daily." That's what you have to do.
Every
You have,
day.
you have to die to that flesh every doggone day, every day.
Mhm. It's been about 14 months, maybe 15, about 14 months. Uh, no relationships that include any intimate connection. And for me, it's been a journey consecrating my mind, my body, my spirit into one, the spirit bringing that flesh in subjection to it, so that whatever tried to attack me, that I am yielded to for most of my life, I've had opportunity to defeat this flesh by living one
Mhm.
day at a time in the grace of God,
Right.
intentionally
Mhm.
preparing myself for the next healthy relationship. That's trusting myself to be able to give the next person that I meet a healthy me versus a broken me that I think I need them to help me to heal.
Mhm.
Because if I'm not in the healing process or healing or healed from my journey that I expose myself to,
Mhm.
no person is going to give me what I need. I need to already be bringing it.
Mhm.
Therefore, when I meet that person, I will not become their healing process either. They
Mhm.
should be walking in their healing too, right?
Absolutely.
Because if I think that I'm going to give them what I have, but they're not giving it to themselves, I'm going to be emptied again,
Mhm.
right? And me as being this male that I'm becoming, this man that I'm becoming, I cannot afford to empty myself into a vessel, another woman, and she's not filling herself up with something when I get there.
Mhm.
You know, therefore I'm going to be empty because she won't be able to pour into me.
Right.
You know, and we need to be pouring into each other so that we can align ourselves to having the same mission goal or outcome of the dating process, which is marriage.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's been a journey for me to keep my eyes focused on that particular prize.
Hmm.
You know, as long as I keep it that focused, I won't allow the distractions of my childhood, my young adulthood, to become factors in my next decision when I am triggered by things
Hmm.
that I may like, enjoy, and want to do, but I don't need those things to survive.
Right.
You know, learning to denounce the hidden things of darkness for sure,
Hmm.
walking in peace and restoration. That's been a strength that I think that he's helped me to become a healthier man with for sure.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mhm. I mean, good conversation tonight dealing with men, this transitional, this transformational aspect of how do we look at breaking this generational, um, I'll call it a curse or a cycle, if you will, that's entrapped us into not changing,
Hmm.
not growing up, not maturing, not developing, not asking for help, not asking questions, not being teachable, to become more vulnerable for other men to embrace us and
Yeah.
to understand that the journey that we've traveled, we're not alone.
Yeah.
I went to a program, then it was a 3 day thing called Every Man's Battle. And every time I hear someone talk about their plight with sexual immoralities, dealing with pornography, or something like that, I said, "This every man I have talked to in this life, pastors, you name, have dealt with every man's battle, the flesh." you know, for them to say they don't deal with, they're inhuman. Even the Pope is going to deal with the flesh because he's a human being.
Yeah.
The question is that he's putting things to replace desiring, fulfilling the desire of the flesh with, but that don't mean you don't deal with this flesh.
Hmm.
And we can talk about it, we get stronger. We're not alone. And
Yeah.
it's okay that we're dealing with stuff. It's not
Hmm.
okay to just deal with stuff.
Hmm.
You know, it's okay you're dealing with it, but it's not okay to stay in the problem. But we're
Right.
looking for solutions today.
Hmm.
But I appreciate you joining us tonight talking about this. We've been on the Stephanie and Seaton show that we do every fourth Sunday at 7 p.m. We target men who have questions, who have ideas, who have processes of life, who have detours that they've taken in life. And we talk about solutions that we know has helped us to become better, different, change, growth, shaking off of things that brought us on a different platform of looking at ourselves differently when we look in the mirror. No more shame. But we have peace tonight. Peace tonight as we're growing into who we need to be.
Hmm.
You know, most definitely. So we welcome Hilton to this show. He's new to us on this platform. He's going to come in every fourth Sunday to help just broaden the aspect of delivering different messages to the audience throughout this world that we're going to be touching living rooms throughout. And men are going to be hearing this. They're going to be doing this playback and they're going to be calling in and asking questions. We want to be able to be prepared. So we want to continue to grow and become the men that we need to be so we can begin to share with others. And if we're struggling, we're going to put that out here too, because guess what? Every man's battle. We
Absolutely.
deal with what we deal with so
Yeah.
we can grow through what we need to grow through.
Right.
Then we come out hopefully better, more mature, more healthier, and more at peace as a man itself. Right? Any other thoughts before we get out here tonight? Enjoyed everything we talked about for sure.
Yeah, I think this is a very constructive conversation. I think it's a conversation that needs to be needed. I think with every podcast we do, I think there needs to be more transparency, more honesty, and more integrity in terms of dealing with the core issues of men. and particularly the things that we go through. I think there needs to be a level of intimacy that is also incorporated into it as well, because we want to make sure that we loving on the brothers as well, because it's painful to deal with that trauma and deal with those core parts of us that we have neglected for so many years, that it's scary, it's fearful, it is very painful, and and wounds, open wounds, when they're not treated, they grow, they fester, they stink, and they grow maggots,
You think?
physical
Yep,
wounds.
most definitely.
And so then imagine how festering our internal wounds, and because we have neglected it for so many years and over a long extensive period of time, so if the physical wounds can fester, stink, and grow maggots, just imagine how the emotional wounds that's been neglected for 20, 30, 40 years, just
Yes.
imagine how severely that can affect us over a period of time. So I think there needs to be a level of intimacy, love, honesty, transparency, and definitely vulnerability, so that we can help each other heal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And help a generation of people that's coming up behind us to heal as well.
most
Uh,
definitely.
yeah, so yeah, I think I think we're definitely headed in the right direction. If God be willing, he will touch a lot of people with what we're doing. You know.
All right, good deal. Well,
Yeah.
until next time, next month, the fourth Sunday of the month at 7 p.m. Join us here, My Brother's Keepers broadcast on the Stephanie M. Seaton show, and you can hear the playbacks. You're gonna send those things out to the listening audience so you can play back, like this station, send it to other people so they can hear it as well, so we can continue to grow as a network as well as a family. Once again, we thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next month on Sunday at 7 p.m. Thank you guys. Have a great night.
All right.